being recorded right now.
Well, it's the truth. Nothing but the truth.
So just put yourself on mute for the moment, Sabrina.
Yeah.
So you're out of there. And also just to note, I'm sorry, do your opening thing as you do, Maria, and then we'll talk about it.
Thank you. I thought you were going to do it. Okay, I'm Maria Ortiz, co-chair of Housing, Health, and Human Services. My co-chair, Joe Rasucha. And we are, this is the monthly meeting, June 2022. We hold our meetings the third Thursday of each month. Per the governor's order, we're still meeting remotely. I always encourage people to sign up for the CB4 e-blast so that you can get the agenda, links to the documents for the meetings beforehand. I saw there were 2 members of the public. I don't know if they've attended any meetings before, but I will just give my quick blurb about how we run our meetings, which is after there's usually a presentation. After each presentation, first the committee is going to ask questions or make comments. Then the members of the public or the attendees get the opportunity to speak. In order to speak, you have to press. You want to say hello, Gabriel? It's being recorded.
How many people are there?
There's enough people. In order to speak, you have to press the raised hand button on your screen. And after the attendees speak, the discussion goes back to the committee for the business section. And that's when we have a discussion again. We vote to write a resolution if we need to for action items. And then that goes before the next full board meeting for a vote. And today on the agenda, we only have 2 things, which is great. It's the New York State hotel conversion bill and the affordable housing plan, the rest of it.
So let me just note that we have 2 members, one who is coming late, Katie Stokes at 7:30, and another member, Jessica Chait, who has conflict with another board meeting, and she may be late or may not be able to come at all. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. And the main part of our discussion tonight is about the Manhattan Community Board 4 affordable housing plan. First, though, we're going to talk about the New York State hotel conversion bill, but we're not going to talk about the bill in terms of its substance, its issues, whatever, because we've done that already. And our board, as in general, said we're in favor of that idea. More specifically now, a bill passes, and then there has to be an implementation phase and a regulatory phase figuring out how to manage all this. In the meantime, there will be not-for-profit providers who may want to take advantage of this new source of funding to convert hotels to supportive housing. So we, as a community board, recently passed at our June meeting a social service provider checklist that now details out all the information we would like to get from social service providers if and when they are presenting or proposing a new facility in our district. And our action tonight is very simple. We will ask the community board office to pull together a list of social service providers, send out to them information saying this bill has passed. If you're interested in pursuing it or have any sites you're considering in our district, let us know. And if you are, please fill out the social service provider checklist so we get ahead of the curve on this as opposed to always being in the reactive mode. And that's the sole action we would take tonight on this. So I'd like to go around the room and take questions or thoughts on that. Let's start. Also,
Joe, do you want to introduce that we have the CB4 chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I apologize. So joining us tonight because we're having a conversation regarding the affordable housing plan, the second part, I'll talk about in a moment. We're joined by Jeffrey LeFrancois, who's our community board chair, who has been really helpful in moving this along. So starting now with questions about the action about just sending out the letter, starting with Travis.
No questions.
Paul.
Same here.
Roberta.
Something.
Betty. You're on mute, Betty. Ready for Betty. Josephine? No? JD?
No, sounds great, Joe. Just one question. We are sending this letter to a social service provider.
No, all social service providers who are doing any sort of community work or social service work in our district already. So people that we have relationships that we know. Hector?
Gotcha.
Hector?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm good.
Betty?
Thank you.
Betty? Yes.
Okay.
And Josephine said yes. Sabrina.
No questions for me.
Okay, and Dolores.
Apologies for being late. Don't know what the question is.
Okay. Bye. Leslie.
I have a quick question. And
Yes.
do we have any sense of what hotels?
No,
maybe-
remember, this program is newly minted. It was approved in the state budget end of May. So again, our sole goal is there are providers out there who have maybe looked at properties we don't know. We just want to get a sense of what are they, and if they are, come and bring us information and submit to us. We have no
Got it.
idea of any locations.
Got it.
Have I missed any members? Okay, so just to restate, the idea is that the bill is passed. We send out to all the social service providers working in our district. Here's this bill. Here's what's happened. If you intend to apply for it, please let us know. And here's our social service provider checklist. Please contact the board with information and fill this out if you are considering a proposal. So I think I got pretty much consensus on that, and we're in good
Yeah.
shape. Okay, great. Now let's move on to our affordable housing plan. For the members of the committee first, this is the second session on the affordable housing plan. We did the first one, which was in the last month, all about things that are done, completed, or in various stages of public approval. Tonight, we're focusing on projects that we are seeking to propose, whether on state-owned land, a city-owned land, state-owned land, or rezoning actions that can help produce affordable housing. Additionally, in July, we'll have our final session. After we agree on the substance in total, there's an intro that's all kind of text that has to be now modified after we adopt what we are doing tonight. Now understand, our Housing, Health, and Human Services Committee meeting will happen prior to the next board meeting. Jeffrey, the next board meeting is the
6th, I believe, of
Yep.
July.
The 26th. Our meeting's on the 21st. So that means when we review tonight, any comments we have, we can also clean them up and put it into our next. Nellie has a hand raised.
It's July 27th.
Oh, July 27th. Sorry. But our meeting is on July 21st, right, Nellie?
Let me double check. Hold on one second.
Our meeting, yes, July
Yes,
21st.
So we have adopted substance number 1, part 1, part 2 we're doing today, and then we'll make the whole intro, which has a couple of new sections. We'll look at that on our July 21st meeting. So therefore, we'll be more than ready by the July 27th board meeting to bring this whole process to a close. Any questions about the process first before we get into the substance? No? Okay. So I'm going to share the screen and put the plan on the screen. And then there's a few items you have to do with that are additional. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So here in our first slide, it is the yellow sections that we are looking at today. We already reviewed the items, the first 5 bullets here at our last meeting and adopted them. Also, we did preservation, illegal demolition, Chelsea NYCHA, and the 421A affordable units. So we're starting tonight with either Empire State Development or New York State Controlled Development Pipeline. Our first slide is just listing you all the sites. In our executive committee meetings, we decided really to create one section that was just about state-owned or state-controlled land. I want to take us through this in general first to see what's what. Site,
Excuse me, Joe,
Yes.
do you want people to interrupt with questions or wait till you're done?
please interrupt as we go along. So
So can
these
you
are,
just tell folks what ESD means?
yes, Empire State Development Corporation, and that is the state development agency. It's a separate authority, but it's controlled by the state. So we're going to run through these so you can understand the different levels of the different permutations of how the state owns or controls things. Site K is a site that is controlled by the state through the Javits Center Development Corporation, right opposite the Javits Center between 35th and 36th Streets. It was condemned originally for a plaza, and it has been put out for request for proposal, but it's controlled by the Javits Center Development Corporation. The Marshalling Yards, that's the full block between 33rd and 34th, 11th to 12th Avenues. that is also controlled by the Javits Center Development Corporation. Bayview, the former prison, again, controlled by the state directly, subject to the Empire State Development Corporation and its procurement policies. The Intrepid Parking Lot, that is a parking lot that is owned by New York State DOT, Department of Transportation, and leased to the Intrepid for parking for visitors. It was acquired as part of Route 9A when the entire West Side Highway was rebuilt. MTA Quill Bus Depot. MTA controls it, owned by the state, operated as a very large bus depot, 3 floors of bus depot. The former Hunter College Voorhees campus, 450 West 41st Street. That was a CUNY campus, and now they have consolidated, and that building's been vacant for about 5 years. So these are our 6 state-controlled or owned properties. The first one is Bayview, and I want to talk about this in detail, but I'm going to come back to it in a second. The broader ones, the Javits Center Marshalling Yards. This has been in our plan since 2015. And the only change we're making on this proposal is to make sure that from here on, we're making sure we maximize the proposed 12 FAR of development rights of FAR for residential use. In our prior plan, we know that the Javits Center needs to use 1 story or 2 stories for trucking that serve the Javits Center. And we had said we use 10 FAR for residential and the 2 for the trucking use. Here we say we'd be willing to go to 14 FAR and 2 for the trucking use. So we'd be able to get the full 12 residential FAR. In general, on these very large sites, the plan had units between 80 and 165 of AMI. On all of those sites, we've added units between 50, 60, 80, 100, 125 of AMI. You'll see that repeated over and over. And we probably want to put a note on here that there should be no donut holes. That'll probably be in the intro. Next site, Quill Bus Depot. Again, a full block. This one between 40th and 41st Streets, 11th to 12th Avenue. Here, there are 3 full floors of bus garage. It is hard to see it here, but these are very, very high floors. Buses are reconditioned, repainted, rebuilt, and also parked for layover. This block also could produce roughly 473 units of affordable housing in that full range. I want to note that both of these are in a manufacturing zone. They are in an M15 manufacturing zone with an FAR of 5, in some cases an FAR of 2. So we're talking about a large rezoning, these being immediately adjacent to the Hudson Yards Special Zoning District. We would also propose to include all of these in the Special Hudson Yards District to enable to have a more finer tuned zoning. Next one, Site K. This is in addition to the plan. This has not been here before. This is this large site right opposite the convention center. There was an RFP that was put out. There were responses. The state never moved ahead on the RFP. So again, we look at this as an affordable housing site. But in general, these large sites, they need to be sold. The state needs to make money. They can't just sell them for nothing. And the proposal is to have 75% market rate and 25% affordable housing on these sites. Because they are so dense at 12 FAR, this would yield 171 units. It requires no rezoning, except for a text change to allow a full 12 FAR. And I'm going to come back to that in a second too. And then Voorhees College. This is a much smaller site. It is 29,000, roughly 30,000 square foot footprint. The FAR is 7.5 FAR. And here on the smaller sites, we change our model and to say that this should be 100% affordable. These are not huge sites where the state needs to make a lot of funds. And they are doing a lot in our district, create a lot of FAR.
Hector has a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Hector.
Hey guys, I hope you can hear me. As far as the affordability, I understand it seems like it's varying between the site, the 50, 25% affordable, What is that based on, basically? Is that because of the neighborhood development or what's around them, or how's that?
Sure.
figured out?
If you can mute, yeah. So the plan in the past on the large sites has always called for an even split between 80, 100, and 125. That has not changed since 2015. In order to broaden the affordability ranges, right? We're now introducing units on the large sites, 50, 60, 80, all the way through. Because again, one of the issues we have on these sites is that the state of New York has a fiduciary responsibility. They can't just give things away, especially when you're talking about a site that is a full block, like the marshalling yards, that they're going to put this out to the market, and they're going to say to the market, you have to take the cost of upzoning this, changing the zoning, redeveloping it, and building a portion of it for some sort of industrial or like a Javits use. And therefore, that has a cost inherent with it. We know that it is possible to build a 75-25, 25% affordable and 75% market in our district. It's not all over the place. And that's pretty much after the rationale. Give me some further questions on that.
Yeah, I have a quick question, Joe.
Yes, Leslie.
I see the bands between 50 and 100, 125 to 165. That's doesn't serve the working poor. I mean, if somebody's a working poor, somebody who is earning 50,000, obviously they won't be able to live in the community. If I wanted to move from a NYCHA complex to one of these locations, there are smaller number of apartments that are available within the working poor range. So I could see somebody who is probably living in the new developments between 39th Street, the Hudson Valley area, who would love to move to one of these facilities and get subsidized and get rents that are much better.
So actually,
who are we serving in terms of this?
Actually, the goal of the community is not just to serve one population or another. It's to serve the broad range of incomes. I think here's a good important statistic to understand what's guided our discussion throughout all of this in the past 6 years. Today, a one bedroom rents market rate at $3,500 a month. A two bedroom starts at $5,800 a month. To afford that one bedroom, you have to make $130,000 a year. To afford a two bedroom, a family of three has to make $265,000 a year. These AMI bands at 125 or 165 do not produce rents at substantially lower. So let's say, for example, a two bedroom is, I believe, Roberta, you can check this too, I think it's like $3,900 or $4,000, right? That is substantially lower than the market. And that means we're serving people who are the two income households who are totally priced out of our market. The units at 50 and 60% of AMI are being produced in every single 75-25 building on privately held land. This section is about publicly owned land. So the private market is producing, with every new development, units at 60% and below. Is producing very few units at above 60%, because the private developments are married with tax-exempt bonds and low-income housing tax credits. And the tax credits, and I'm saying this very specifically, although you can be at 80%, it drives it down to 60%. So that's the whole issue we continually struggle with. The zoning says you can have inclusionary housing up to 80, but actually it's all produced at below 60. So let's say we have roughly 3,000 or 4,000 units that have been produced below 60%, and we have maybe 500 units being produced above that. And that's what this plan seeks to reconcile. So this is a good beginning discussion on this. I'm going to go to Roberta and then come back to you, Leslie. Roberta?
So I do appreciate that of all the developments we've kind of gone through, that these lower income bands have been added. I was wondering if there's a justification for the mix. So the this is an example for the marshalling yards, you have about a ratio where more of the units are going to between 80 and 165 and fewer are going to 50 to 60. I was just wondering just the sort of rationale there.
Joe, do you mind if I zoom out on that for a second?
Yeah, because I'm also going to get the last part of the plan from last month so you can see how it
Sure.
compares, because that's the flip side of it. Go ahead.
Yep, Roberta, thank you for the question, because we should have led with this. So a lot of this is being driven by the fact that the as of right development in the current Hudson Yards zoning comes with the development of those AMI 50 to 60% as mixed in with the market rate. So we already have a huge number, a significant number of units being built, many of which are online and many are still to come in the 50 to 60% AMI income bands, because that's the numbers we got that became as of right when those zonings were certified, a decade ago. The approach here is that because we didn't get anything north of 60%, was that we could push even more for those middle and upper bands, knowing that we were guaranteed the 50 and 60% because of what the zoning text actually requires on existing development in the Hudson Yards zoning text.
And it's very interesting. This is the weird HPD argument that they brought to us back in 2005, that the public land should be used for the more moderate middle and the private land is used for the lower income. It's fascinating, but that's exactly how it works. I'm going to open this up, and I have it open so I can switch it in a second, and we'll see the stats on it. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to stop the share.
And Roberta, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was the rationale, and that's helpful.
Got it.
Roberta, are you seeing the current presentation or the old one? Because I'm about to switch.
The old one.
The old one, right? So now we can see here on the screen, right, that you can see of 1,624 units, the majority here, 202, 370, 704, are below 60% of AMI.
Joe, we're still seeing
Sorry,
the Javits
current,
Center
sorry.
market.
Oh, okay, opposite. Apologize.
Current, I meant the one that was on there before.
Yeah, I got it now. There we go. Now can we see the one from last month? Yes.
Yes. No, I remember.
These numbers need to be tweaked a little bit and verified, but here we go. On the bottom, follow the cursor, 202, 370, 704. So that's already over 1,300 units that have been produced, versus if you add these up together, much less above the 100 is 175. So 275 versus 1,300. That's the really, and I think we have to internalize this to understand the zoning is saying the most expensive land is producing the lowest income units.
Yep.
So how do we have the least expensive land, the public one, and we have to spread it around? Is that helpful to sort of lay out for us?
Yeah, that's super helpful. I did want to make a comment, sort of
Yes.
an extension of Leslie's comment, which is just, I do appreciate that it is worthwhile subsidizing moderate to middle income units. But I do think that there is a portion of the market that does still serve that group, not the middle of what is available on the market, but the market does have the capacity to support that 165 band. But the market does not seem to support anything below that. And while I think this is a very reasonable compromise, I do think that, and the context that you shared earlier was helpful. I see, and then some folks I know in the neighborhood see somewhat less value in subsidizing that in particular, though I do understand that's a simple difference in opinion.
Right. Travis?
I want to say I appreciate this effort as well, but I also want to echo Roberta's opinion a little bit more in a little different way. So, Joe, you said earlier that to be able to afford the average rent in this neighborhood, you'd have to make $135,000, right? So that comes out to like 31% of the person's annual income.
Yeah, 130. It's actually it was 130. So but we always calculate income on 30% of gross income.
Right.
And
so,
make for affordability.
But I found that factor has been somewhat antiquated over the years. And so like the effort of this is to be able to get like more social workers and teachers and for working professionals to be able to like live in our community, the people who often get priced out, who create a lot of value. We're not taking consideration that millennials and Gen Z carry a lot of student loan debt, a lot of extra debt that come into play here that make that making 135 doesn't really make that one bedroom affordable.
Right. I think the problem we have with this issue, we talked about it at meeting after meeting, we cannot change the federal standard, which is 30% affordability, right? And we know that people actually, with 30% affordability, have more debts and responsibilities, right? Like that's just the reality. However, it is not within our ability nor New York City's, nor New York State to change the federal standard.
Right.
So in fact,
I think my point is I think the exercise is not necessarily getting us to where we want to be able to get to create a more economically diverse and fair housing opportunities for our neighborhood. But it doesn't sound like we can do much to rectify that. Kind of
not in the percentage part. That's the problem. But let's continue the discussion about the AMIs. Josephine, next.
I just want to go back to something you said earlier. I believe you said that private developers can allocate more units at a lower AMI because they receive tax breaks or they want to get tax breaks. So when the 421 ends, how does that affect all of this?
So it's not actually tax breaks, it's tax-exempt bonds.
All right.
And that's a type of financing that comes from New York State or New York City. And 421A, which is a real estate tax exemption, plays into it. However, the zoning states, I think they take step by step. The zoning says the units must be majority below 80% of AMI to get the most zoning bonus benefit. However, that's coupled with financing. The financing are these items called tax-exempt bonds, which are mortgage securities that are floated by a city or state housing agency. When you use those bonds, you must have units that are at 60 and 50% and 40%. So that automatically takes it down below the 80 because you want the financing. Why do you want it? It's basically a mortgage and it's a cheaper rate. Now, the part of the equation that always comes into it is what about real estate taxes? So there's going to be an issue as projects move ahead because those projects get a partial real estate tax exemption. However, in the area of Hudson Yards, the developers, believe it or not, don't pay real estate taxes. They pay it through a formula. So there is a lot of possibility to work on that. On some of the sites that are north, not part of Hudson Yards, the 421A issue is the big issue that I think it's going to be, but I think it's a broader like real estate development and affordable housing issue that's going to come to the fore.
So I guess my question then is if that comes to an end, will we be seeing less private developers with these lower AMI units?
It will depend upon where they are, a couple of factors. What district they're in, right? If Hudson Yards, the premium for market rate is so much more, so therefore your market rate are higher, so you can afford to, subsidize lower. If they acquire the land recently. So for example, he uses state land. It was not bought at a market rate. That's a factor into it. So this is really complicated equation about, I think on the private sector, if someone has bought land a while ago, we will see development on that land. If they are acquiring it now, we would see less. Is that sort of helpful general guide?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Thanks.
Let's go back to Leslie and then go to Hector again.
The question I have, Joe, if you could clarify for me, you said we can't have any input on the bands themselves.
Oh, no, we can have input on the bands. It's the 30% of income that is a federal standard. This is our discussion tonight about the bands, of course.
So we can choose the bands as we will, as we could.
Yes.
So
as
the
long
board
as we
has
do
an
it,
opportunity. Yeah.
no, as long as we do this in a comprehensive fashion. In other words,
Right.
if we tonight decide, oh, we should not have 20% of the units at 165, but it should be 10, then let's do that across the board on every site. So it's a consistent approach. That's the only thing we should be doing.
I think that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, because, as you said before, the prices are so high in the neighborhood and have changed over the years, as Travis was talking about. It really does exclude the working poor, who are the nurses and the actors and the actresses. They work in the gig economy. They need to have a secure environment, a secure location to live in. And so there does present a problem. Only the high-end actors and actresses get the top scale, not everybody else.
But I wouldn't put nurses in the working poor. Those are
Well,
union
no,
jobs for the most time.
Nurses are different. I get it, and I get it. But teachers, for example, the average salary, somebody in the panel can maybe talk about it. They earn 50, 65,000. I don't know what the beginning salaries are at this stage.
There will be teachers on the job for 4 or 5 years who will make $80,000.
Yeah, I was going to say the average New York teacher makes around 75 to 80.
Okay, so they
right.
would be
Yeah,
qualified.
that still
for
prices
this.
them out.
Yeah, it prices them out.
Right, but I want you to be aware that if you have 2 teachers, right, who are married or living together, couples, for a family of 2, the maximum income at 165 is 176. So those 2 teachers are just going to be under.
But why are we assuming it's 2? Why don't we also give the ability for one person to live?
I'm just,
I'm asking you a question. I'm not being argumentative. I'm just asking, what's the logic?
Leslie, of course. So the bands for a single person, if you start at 80% of AMI, start at 74,000 maximum, right? At 100, 93,000. At 102, at 120, 112,000. The bands for the 50 and 60% of AMI for a single person, 46,000, 56,000. What I wanted to note is the numbers don't go up so dramatically as you add on household members. For a single person at 130 of AMI, it's 121,000. For a family of 2, it's 138. So immediately, if you have 2 people working, both making 75,000, they're out. They don't qualify anymore. It's just that you got to look at how these tables work, and that's what's been driving us to figure out how to accommodate all the different income groups. It's not like they jump dramatically. Hector, next.
Yeah, I just wanted to revert back to the comment you made about, let's say, for example, Hudson Yards. The developer doesn't pay taxes traditionally like other locations. Could you elaborate on that formula a little bit? I'm getting into the weeds.
In Hudson Yards, there's a special taxing district, and the developers pay payments in lieu of taxes. It's based on a formula. It's based on land values. It's pretty detailed. What it does is, because all the Hudson Yards real estate taxes don't go back to the city of New York directly, they go to the Hudson Yards Infrastructure Corporation to pay the debt on the bonds that built the subway, the parks, the streets, all the stuff that was not there in Hudson Yards. That's a very special thing. But Hudson Yards is a big section of our district, right? From 30th Street up to 41st Street, from 9th Avenue over. So that's why that exists. But I think Sabrina's question, which is very important, is what happens when this 421A, which has gone away now, what replaces it? And I do believe the state will come up with some sort of solution eventually, because you have to, if you are required to build affordable housing, especially when it's inclusionary for permanent use, the affordable units do not produce enough income to pay regular real estate taxes. That's just a standard part in affordable housing. So do we have more questions about the income bands here? So far, we haven't. Leslie made a suggestion. Maybe we drop the one. Oh, sorry. Who else?
It's Maria.
Yeah. I can only see 4 people. So Maria, tell me who's got their hand up. Okay.
Oh no, it's me who wanted to ask you something.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, would if it's I was looking at the AMIs for 2022 in the New York City area and just kind of curious. I think you and Jeff.
It's not New York City, it's New York metropolitan area.
Yeah, I looked at the website just now.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think you and Jeffrey already answered it, but I was curious if I'm looking at the AMIs and the numbers you have for each, couldn't we put the bulk between 60 and 125 instead of having so many at 165?
Well, I think that's what Leslie just raised now, to drop the percentage of the 165. These are at, the 80 to 165 is 20, 20, and 20, right? So we can drop the 165 to 10. I think that was the suggestion. Does that make sense in general, committee members?
I'm sorry, do you mean like to 10 units?
No,
Where it says
no.
total?
These are percentages of 100. So it's at a 20% of the total. We drop it to 10% of the total. It would half it.
But can I just?
Yes.
So
Dolores.
There's always, oh, sorry, Dolores, go ahead.
Bear with me a moment. I really appreciate our very spirited debate at the very specific numbers, but a few things. One, if any of these sites actually do get developed, there's going to be, at that time, a different formula of probably financing how they get to the market. And there's also going to be the affordability for whoever that developer is to bring it to market. I think what is probably much more productive for us, instead of trying to hammer out exact numbers now, is to get a general sense of what direction do we need of affordability within our entire district. And I think, Joe, the information you gave us about the numbers that have been produced, Jeffrey, the information that you gave us about what is already baked in is so important in that. But I think it's more important for us to say what the spirit of how much affordability we need at what ranges, instead of being very specific. Because my problem is that we may get into a situation down the road where none of us are on the board anymore because we'll be termed out, and there's the document, and then there's this fight back and forth, which gets us to saying, well, this is what we already said we wanted, and this is all we get. And the reason why I'm concerned about that is we're getting so into the minutia, we forget the point of that all of our efforts is to always produce the maximum amount of affordable housing within our district. For some of these buildings, it'll be more affordability for the lowest, and for some of them will be in the middle, and maybe we can get upper middle, right? But our objective is always to fight for more affordable housing. So we're all on the same side of the fight. But I think when we get into the nitpicky parts of it, we're dividing our conversation. Do I need more of this or I need more of that? It's going to change. So I'm just a little bit disturbed because I think that we're digging in so deep right now into what we want to put into this document that we're losing the fact that in the future, we're going to have to negotiate all these things anyway. And we really should be understanding the spirit of what are the holes that we know that will be there because of what's baked in, and what is it that we'd like to see for the totality of our district.
So let me just note for a moment, this document's a guide. It's not an actual, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. But it is helpful that we're achieving some consensus and talking about this, because on sites like this guide gives the policy and political signal to the development community as to what we're looking for, and to our state and our city elected officials as we're looking for. So I like the idea that we've talked about it and saying, oh, well, maybe we don't want to have so many in that band in general as a policy. Let's redistribute them down. Jeffrey, you have hopefully one of the better reconciling words on this. We can bring this to conclusion.
Yeah, I think understanding that this is a framework, it's a guide. This is not absolute. To get any of this, we need significant actions by the city, potentially some by the state. But what this does is gives us a seat at the table that is proactive. Instead of us reacting to the city saying it wants to do this, or the state saying we want to do this, a la Penn Station, we get to come to the table with at least an initial framework that indicates both to the public, so the city or the government, and to those who are going to develop it, private developers, where a conversation could start from a healthy perspective. And I certainly, this is wonderful to be part of this conversation, would be hesitant to change any of the mix. I know the 165 is uncomfortable for some folks, and I do totally understand that. And the firefighter and the teacher is often referred to. Those are union jobs, but I also think of the bartender or the entertainer, right? Or the receptionist, like the doorman. Like, these are universal jobs in our community that if you're partnered or married to somebody, maybe your income does get to that level. But it's not like you're still free to buy whatever groceries you want. You can't run to Whole Foods every time you go grocery shopping. So I sort of encourage everybody to think about the macro approach and to figure out how we can maximize these sites for as many units as possible overall as well. So I hope that did a little bit, Joe, for what we might have been looking for there.
And another thing I want to say is, but I do want to leave this meeting with the following. Whatever we agree on tonight, we need then to agree by consensus and support at our full board meeting and not relitigate it again. This is so important because achieving the consensus means that we're going to get a plan that the full board has to adopt. And we need to argue with our other members who haven't had the benefit of these conversations. Dolores?
Joe, thank you for raising that. I don't know, and I was hoping to speak about this at full board, but I don't know if people realize that for those that voted no on our ULURP action, the spirit of that probably was they wanted deeper affordability for the lower AMIs. But that no vote actually said you're against affordable housing, because the vote stands in of itself and nobody knows the conversations that we've had. We need to be unified in order to be able to accomplish as much as possible in that affordability. So while we can have the spirited debate and we can have different single opinions, I think that when we do vote no on these large actions like ULURP or the spirit of how much affordability we want, you're only signaling to everybody else that that was a no vote for affordability. They don't see the asterisk that says, I wanted more affordability. That's what gets us labeled NIMBY. So Joe, thank you for raising that, because I think that folks are looking for perfection in everything that we're doing and not recognizing that we push to get as much as possible. And we do get more than most other communities because we're thoughtful like that. And the no vote does not help.
So again, I want to know before we get deeply into that our goal here is to leave tonight with a consensus around the general income bands that will appear in project after project. We have a lot more to talk about, but I'm glad we're going through this first. Hector?
Yeah, I just, I agree with the comment about ULURP, but we also have to understand there are special instances where ULURP could actually work against certain developments. For example, the Fulton Elliott Chelsea developments. Obviously, in a situation like that, it is resident driven, and it's basically based on what the residents wanted. And unfortunately, ULURP would have worked against that kind of situation. So we have to be a little careful where and when we use ULURP, or we advocate for it, because honestly, it would have tied up this situation, these particular developments, for many years, because ULURP is not a quick process, unfortunately, and it would have been tied up in the political theater or whatever it is. In a normal circumstance, ULURP can be utilized as a tool to safeguard the communities and the best interests of residences, but in a case like that, it will probably work against them. So we have to be a little selective as to when we're going to use that.
I just want to note that ULURP is our standard tool for all land use approval. NYCHA, being a public authority, is not subject to ULURP, but I wholeheartedly disagree. NYCHA, because of the deal we did to preserve, that makes sense. However, the next NYCHA project that comes to us should go through the full public review process. We spent a year and a half of our lives trying to figure out Chelsea NYCHA. it is wrong that the public does not get to comment on NYCHA projects across the city. The Port Authority is subject to, they're not subject to ULURP, they're voluntarily doing it. Times Square redevelopment by ESD, not subject to ULURP, they're doing it. I mean, these are the kinds of things, it gives us public review. That's a unique case that we got with Chelsea NYCHA, and our board and our neighborhood residents demand to get public review. So go to Betty and let's close this out and try to come to consensus on the income bands. Yes, Betty.
Two things. One is, I think in the introduction to this part, perhaps there should be an AMI discussion somehow, that this is guidelines, or maybe it's not exactly written into stone, something along those lines. And the other different topic is, when we look at this building, the Hunter building, should we be saying something about that this building would be demolished and a new building would be put on the site? The other site, many of the other sites are vacant. And how, is there some way we need to pull that out?
Yeah, Betty, these are the kind of notes we have to pick up on here to get, this was in our plan already, and we call it a site, we should note it should be demolished. I think you're correct. There actually is a section in the introduction about AMIs, but I think it's got to be beefed up based upon our discussion tonight about why we come to, what is our context? So let me ask again for the members so we can close this broad AMI discussion. Number one, should we leave it as it is? Or number two, should we decrease the 165 to half and distribute between 80 and 125, or all to 125? So I'm going to go around the room to get people's thoughts about that. Let's start out with Maria. I'm sorry, with Travis.
All right, I'll answer first. Unless you don't want me to, because I'm co-chair. I would select number two.
To half it, okay.
Yeah.
Travis?
I'm sorry about that, Joe. I was on mute and I couldn't find my
Understood.
I'm with Maria. I would go with option number two.
Okay. Roberta.
I would also go with option number two.
JD.
I'm fine with reducing it, but I just want to echo Dolores' statement. Whatever we decide, it's going to be a long process.
Right.
And whatever is promised is not necessarily what's going to be delivered. So I think the general principles, and I want to emphasize one thing, what we're trying to get is balance, balance, balance.
Next one is Sabrina.
Option two.
Okay. Josephine.
Two.
Did I go to Hector already?
Nope.
Two. Okay. I'm sorry, I can't see everybody here. Paul. I don't see him. Leslie.
Option two.
Okay. Pete.
Option two.
Okay, so that'll be a policy thing and we'll talk about it up front. Do we have any further questions now about the general section on ESD or state controlled?
Joe, I do on the Hunter College site, actually.
Yes.
And I wonder why, given what this is going to be, what this building will be around, which is Port Authority towers and a pretty significant, volume of buildings, why is only 7.5 the FAR for this site?
The 7.5 FAR is both in the Clinton Special District and in this Hudson Yards Special District. The blocks that are south or north of 42nd are at 7.5 FAR to create a reduction from the towers. So 42nd Street, both sides, you can see here is MEMA, right? And the north side is Manhattan Plaza. That's an FAR of 12. When you go to the blocks to the north between 10th and 11th, we reduced that to 7.5 as part of the Clinton Special Zoning District, rezoning for 11th Avenue, and Hudson Yards 7.5. Because the blocks just to the south of this, Jeffrey, are R8.
Joe, I understand what the blocks look like intimately, I guess.
No, I'm talking, no, not what they look like, what they're zoned. The zoning steps down to a lower density in the mid blocks.
Right, which is, yes. But I guess what I'm curious to know from the committee given that we're putting this building forward as 100% affordable and not one that would have market rate and affordable housing, we have the ability to put forward a higher FAR on this site because it's a 100% affordable housing site. And so I think I'm curious to know if folks think we should consider a higher FAR, which would generate more units on this public site, given sort of the overall area in which it's in.
We're putting this forth as 100% affordable. However, we do not know if the state will agree it's 100% affordable. So
Absolutely.
I would be
None of
very
these terms
careful.
do we know that.
I would
if we're creating the document, I think, and we're putting it forward in our terms, I think it might be worthwhile to consider the boldest of terms. And on those sites that are being put forward as 100% affordable, I wonder if we're willing to maximize or really, push a little bit more to get more units.
Okay, so let's have a discussion about this, and then we're going to close up on this section because we have many more sections to go. Starting with Betty.
I don't know. I think I buy the zoning rationale, Joe, that you raised, because there's a lot of big buildings, and also it almost seems unrealistic to make it a higher density, because then if it's all affordable housing, how are you gonna pay for it? So anyway, I'm more towards keep the zoning.
Dolores?
I think because this document is outlining, the first part of it, what we produced, the second part of it, what is still possible. We need to demonstrate what is here and what is already the actual zoning. I think the conversation can happen if something ever goes to RFP.
Right.
But I think in this document, if we're going to be putting in an FAR that's not the FAR that's zoned for this district, one, do they assume that we made a mistake? Two, is there a context for us saying that we want to upzone it? It doesn't make sense in this document. I do think, Jeffrey, that the conversation makes sense overall, but I don't know that in the document we put forth an FAR that doesn't fit the zoning.
No, we do. On numerous sites within Hudson Yards, this document proposes doubling them because the existing FAR in Hudson Yards is 6, and all the sites in this document put forth increase it to 12.
Actually, the majority, Jeffrey, are not in Hudson Yards yet. The only one is Site K, and we have a whole change. We have a whole section coming up with Hudson Yards and changing the residential use. But the actual base FAR on the sites that are not in the district, we're increasing it from 2 or 5 FAR, proposing 2 or 5 FAR up to 12 or 14. So we're very liberal on certain sites. There's no question on that.
So then I think that if you are thinking of something like that, it needs to be broken out. The allowable FAR for this site currently is
right.
To increase affordability, our community is willing to have, and then have that conversation. But I think that just putting it out there like this, if I am someone who is using our document to help understand the nature of the community, the policies that they want to put forth, whoever's looking at it, this is a reference guide, right? A reference guide and a window into what we are looking for, but without that asterisk of explaining what the actual FAR allowable is, I think that gets us into a little bit of a fuzzy place. That's just my gut.
Let's go to Roberta next.
Sure. So I appreciate Jeffrey's sentiment on this. I think that it's definitely in the correct direction. And I'm wondering if there is a way to be a little bit purposeful in saying we are open to increasing the FAR by, I think we've seen programs that have given extra 1 FAR or 2 FAR for the inclusion of additional affordable units. I know that that's not exactly what this is, but
that's
we're not talking about. I don't think that the conversation that we have on the table is particularly controversial, but I do think that the sentiment I'd love to see it captured somewhere because I think it is a good one to bring to the table.
Maybe this belongs in some of the intro things, talking about how we, if for projects that are fully affordable, something like that, because I'm concerned when we say something that is blanket, it can be taken another way. JD has his hand up next.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This should be a larger conversation. Increased height is a very volatile issue among a lot of people that live around there and below 42nd Street. It certainly is a good idea to think about, but I don't think this committee should decide what it should be without a community discussion about increased height. So if there is something, I would say that we welcome a community discussion about the feasibility of increased height to add affordable housing. But I do not think we should take a position without inviting the community to comment on it.
So what I'll note is that I feel very comfortable on saying things when we're talking about sites that we've had in the plan already, that we're talking about major upzonings on, because we've said it and it's been talked about and discussed, right? It's when we're talking about areas of Hudson Yards that we sought to keep at a lower density, that we have to be very careful, because what prevents, if we move this side up, what about the other mid blocks with this stuff? So you just got to be thinking about it in the broader context. I want to hear from the rest of the committee. Sabrina, thoughts?
I also have mixed opinions on it, because I also think about like how the affordability part, like how are we going to be able to build it? So honestly, I don't have an opinion at this moment.
Okay. Josephine?
I mean, I think, the spirit is here. We all want to see more affordability, but I do think it's going to require some more discussion for many of the reasons already stated.
Mm-hmm. Pete?
We've been down this road before. I prefer keeping it at low density. We know how developers are. They'll always ask for the higher FAR. So, and that's not good for the light.
Did I miss anybody?
Yes.
Leslie.
Oh.
You're on mute, Leslie.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm conflicted, as was discussed before. I think we should have further discussion on this.
All right, so I think the sense I'm getting, if anybody else wants to speak, this one we leave as is for now, but we're going to do something in this intro talking about flexibility and full affordability, because that's really the question. We're always willing to take density in a certain way if it's fully affordable, but if it's not, we shouldn't be welcoming it so quickly. So let's go to this brings us to the end of our next section. Oh, I'm sorry. There was one more site, was the Intrepid Parking Lot. And in this case, again, this is controlled by state DOT, leased to the Intrepid. If this were developed, the proposal that we put on the current FAR on this location is 5 FAR. It's in the manufacturing M24 zone. This is a state piece of property. It's analogous to the same thing with the Hunter College site. Here, I looked at the same FAR that we have between 43rd and 44th, which is 7.5, to produce roughly 470 affordable units. And again, this would be 100% affordable. I think we kind of had this discussion fully already, but I think the thing that's got to be noted here is there are height limits. And we want to note that whatever gets built here is built within those height limits of 135 feet, because that's part of the Clinton Special Zoning District in the West Clinton area. JD, do you have thoughts about that? Or does that reconcile everything?
Yeah, that's an important concept. But again, Joe, that's city zoning. This is a state-owned site. I'm not sure how that works in the conflict.
The state can always override zoning. However, we are maintaining throughout this document, if there's a zoning change, it must go through the city ULURP process. Any further questions or thoughts on this one, folks? Moving on to our next item, which is Port Authority Bus Terminal replacement project. So this one is much simpler. Here's what the Port Authority has proposed. And the key here is this 2 million square foot, which is gigantic commercial tower up top the terminal on 9th Avenue. Our only recommendation on this is that in fact, that becomes a mixed use tower with half of it residential to produce approximately 1,000 units with 272 affordable units. Thoughts or comments? This is new to the plan. Betty?
Have we discussed that with the Port Authority?
Absolutely not. We're having a discussion in public. That's our goal here.
I'm just double checking that I didn't miss something.
Anyone else on this?
Paul has his hand raised.
Who?
Paul, yeah, Joe, I was wondering,
Yes, Paul.
a little bit interested that someone wants to add all that commercial there. What do they know about the commercial market that we don't know?
Well, first and foremost, Paul, the zoning permits on 8th Avenue and 42nd Street. No matter where we are in today's commercial market, that is one of the, that site is served by 13 subway lines. And at some point, people will come back to offices, period, right? So this is long-term. It's not happening tomorrow. The site on 11th Avenue is also commercial majority. And another part of our section, we're talking about the ability to do more residential. We cover that in our Hudson Yards thing. JD?
This is a tremendous opportunity to get a lot of affordable housing near a major transportation hub. So this is terribly important to focus on. So absolutely, half and half if possible.
Paul, I'm sorry, I may have cut you off.
No, I was just going to say what JD just said. I think a lot of those folks who come back to work in those commercial buildings might want to live right next door. I think it's a great idea. Get all the housing we can.
Hector?
Yeah, Joe, if maybe you can answer this question for me, and maybe this is a little bit controversial, so maybe getting off the rails a little bit. But as far as affordable housing goes, is that open to just, I mean, the way the qualifications are summarized, is it basically only for residents here of New York that qualify for those affordable housing units, or anybody from the U.S. can come in and move into New York City?
So
yeah, I'm sorry.
If the housing is developed through some sort of HPD program or some sort of funded program, it'll be subject to a lottery. Any lottery, New York City residents get preference, always, period. And there are very few lotteries, considering the demand, that New York City resident applicants, that we run out of New York City resident applicants. So the whole goal of these public programs is to make sure they're funded by the state, especially the city, especially, that they benefit New York City residents.
Okay, thank you, Joe. That was very informational. I mean, basically, my concern is that we've already got an overpopulated city, and I'm all for bringing new blood into the city, but unfortunately, we're already, we have a lot of folks here, and the infrastructure can only handle so much. So it would be nice to see that the preference goes to the residents of New York first before it goes out.
It is an absolute criteria. I've never seen a lottery serve people outside of the city.
Great, thank you so much.
Betty?
I'm still stuck on the proposed mixed-use tower. Since this is an affordable housing plan, I would think we absolutely have got to say something about with a component of affordable units or something.
That's what it says, Betty. 1,088 residential units with 272 affordable units.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I didn't see that down there. Okay.
Roberta next.
Sure. This makes a great deal of sense. I appreciate it. Could you detail a little bit more about the way you came to 50 and 25? Are they, yeah, I'm kind of just curious.
No. This was just saying that the Port Authority presented 100% commercial tower, right? That's what they want to do to finance their eventual terminal. We want to say to them, okay, take half of that, make it residential, and whatever that square footage is, which was we calculated, do a 75-25 building there. Because we know they need to derive income as part of the whole terminal redevelopment program. Is that sort of gives you the full picture?
Yeah, and makes a great deal of sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? I see Paul, you already spoke. So hand down, Hector, hand down. Anybody else?
Joe, I just had a quick question between having the proposed mixed use tower there versus the tower like all the way on the left.
So that is covered under a different section of our report about allowing more residential FAR in the Hudson Yards area. Right now, they can only build 6 FAR, and believe it or not, this is the portion of it. This is a 60-story tower, folks. That's a 60-story tower. This is an 80 or 90-story tower. So these are very deceiving scales here, but we're going to come to it. One more thing, and we're not sure if this, and Betty, we don't quite know if this will exist at the end of the day. There's a parking lot right opposite Metro Baptist Church. And once we get the final Port Authority plans and layouts, we've looked at this many times. It's been in our report since 2015 for a small affordable housing building. That has not changed since 2015. But again, all these AMIs will run them differently to put it into the 10% of the 165. So if all these come to pass, around 2,000, 2,100 affordable units on the Port Authority land. I'm sorry, 585 units, 585, 2,000 total. Federally controlled sites. This does not change from our plan at all. When the Morgan Annex was built and buildings were demolished along 9th Avenue between 28th and 29th Streets, there was a foundation laid of steel columns to build above the Morgan Annex. We're asking for this to be looked at from the federal government to require a building that is market rate and affordable above the Morgan Annex. That would produce roughly 130 affordable apartments. Our next section is proposed rezoning and zoning text amendments. And this is a section first about West Chelsea District expansion. I'm going to go through this quickly. It has not changed that much. Betty spoke to me earlier today. We're going to try to clarify and simplify some of the actions the board's taken over the number of years. So we asked for the district to be expanded to deal with the blocks between 11th and 12th and 10th and 11th further south. The city responded saying they would do a framework, and they said, don't do this, look at something else back in 2013. The board in 2014 responded to that saying, actually, we want to continue having discussions about these blocks to do more residential. The southern block for conversion, the northern blocks for residential use. The city in 2021 expanded the district and incorporated the Starrett Lehigh in the terminal warehouse building with no housing, no affordable housing developed. And they also looked at, they rezoned parts of the Douglaston and Lazarian site. So we come back now in 2022, I go back here. Please note that our areas shrink to some degree from what our original ask is. And we say, please look at A, B, and we'll make the bottom one C to do rezoning for residential use. And you will note that all of these have some sort of encumbrance on them. Site A is owned by Georgetown, and that is part of the Gateway tunnel construction for a vent shaft. B is the Con Ed site, a major Con Ed maintenance site. And the ones in this, and then the next one, which is not labeled yet, right here, is a combination of a vehicle maintenance facility for the post office and a sanitation garage. All these industrial uses were pushed to the waterfront before the waterfront was considered to be a desirable place to be. To the south, we have parts of the old they were refrigerated warehouses that are now developed as office buildings. And again, we're seeking to get more affordable housing through conversion. You can see here's on the bottom. You can see the mail truck facility that faces Chelsea Waterside Park. And we went through this and said, make changes in order to, again, produce more affordable housing.
Leslie has a question.
Leslie, go ahead.
I have a quick question. Based on where they're located, I think you at one other meeting previously discussed that they were in flood zones, that area? Would that
almost all of West Chelsea is in a flood zone. And that specifically speaks to the fact that whatever design happens, the ground floors have to be either flood proofed, and the residential would start on the second or third floor of any building built here. A lot of buildings have been built along 11th Avenue, market rate buildings, and that's how there's a whole resilience component. Betty can speak to this briefly. We did this in Chelsea land use. Betty, can you speak to the way things get built?
Yeah, they all have to abide by certain rules that the city has put down. They have various options of, floodgates and going up higher. So it's all laid out. So if something is rezoned, then those rules will have to kick in.
Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, like that flood resilience zoning, Leslie, is mapped all along West Chelsea today. So no matter what you do, you have to abide by it. Any further questions on the West Chelsea section? Okay. We'll get the numbers plunked in here. We haven't done that yet. Now, Hudson River Park Trust, transfer of development rights. Jeffrey, can I turn this over to you?
Sure can. So we've got that park along the river, and it is basically required to be a self-sustaining park. And about a decade ago, the park, along with many in our community and as well as Community Board 2 in the South and Board 1 as well, came up with a plan for the transfer of development rights from the piers in the park to receivable sites in our neighborhoods or in neighborhoods to the south. One block there is a plan and I'm sorry, Joe?
One block upland only.
Yes, exactly. One block upland. So only between 11th and 12th Avenue. So 11th, and the West Side Highway, basically. There are not a lot of sites, but what we sort of want to consider here is we like the park and we want to make sure the park can generate money when it does have the opportunity to transfer those air rights. And then we want to make sure that when they do that, we are prepared for what is going to be developed on that site and that it makes sense. And so this section looks at the sites between 11th and 12th that would be eligible for air rights from the piers that would both support the park and hopefully help us meet some of our goals in terms of development in the area.
And you will note this slide has been in our report since 2015. And many of these sites, all of these sites have been in the report since 2015, but now they're a little bit modified because of actions the city has taken since. So in fact, in our last section about West Chelsea, this site has been rezoned. We recommended it to be rezoned and to be Hudson River Park development rights and inclusionary. And in fact, those are noted in the section of our report that this is already almost finished with construction, and it has 234 units. We recommended this site also, La Lazarian. This has 55 affordable units. It's under construction. Also, it's going to be completed in December of 2023. But now we go to the sites that this one has not been rezoned. This developer had an application and pulled it out. And this is another large site that could produce 369 units. Again, a combination of inclusionary development rights and Hudson River Park Trust. The phrase pari passu means at the same time. So you can't get one without the other. You must do inclusionary and you must buy Hudson River Park Trust development rights. This is the Con Ed's. Yes.
That site there, isn't that encumbered by Gateway infrastructure?
It is currently encumbered by Gateway and will have a vent building, but the majority of the site will be able to be developed. The vent building will be in this corner right here, Betty.
Okay, but I think that maybe is that in the text here?
We should note it.
Yeah.
It was in there before.
Okay.
It may have slipped out in the revision.
Okay.
And then the Con Ed site, again. So we're talking about high density zoning here on a lot of full block or partial full block sites. And then again, we come back to the same thing we talked about before, the Quill Bus Depot and the marshalling yards, because they would take Hudson River Park development rights also. And it notes that it's included in the section on ESD. The only additional site been in the report since 2015 is a site on 11th Avenue, the west side between 55th and 56th Streets, just south of the sanitation garage. And we proposed at that point to go to a 12 FAR building here. So it'd be a high density building, and it is in the other area of the Clinton Special Zoning District to produce 238 affordable units, again, with HRPT and inclusionary development rights. So this in total, the production here of all these sites is roughly 1,000 affordable units. Questions on this section? Okey-doke. Hudson Yards. So let's talk about this and talk about our major push here for Hudson Yards. In Hudson Yards, it is an extremely odd zoning. In the areas A3, A4, A5, A2, you can only build 6 FAR. You can build A3, 6 FAR commercial, A4, and A5. You cannot build a full 6 FAR residential. You cannot build a full residential build. You cannot build 12 FAR residential. This is a new part of the proposal. It was already in here to say, let's make sure that we increase it to 12. Not all of the sites can be included because the A2s are already developed or in development. This pertains to the sites that have not yet been developed. So, discussion to increase the capped FAR from 6 to 12. Starting with Roberta, I hope.
I think as long as we're targeting toward affordability with that increase, it makes a great deal of sense. Although I guess even if we aren't, I think it makes a great deal of sense given the existing commercial FARs.
Well,
with them.
Here we are not increasing the overall FAR. These FARs are gigantic. Yeah. On 11th, A3 is a 33 FAR, is a 24 FAR. A4 is a 21.6, and A5 is an 18 FAR. So we're well within the existing FARs. We're just reallocating from commercial to residential. JD, did you have your hand up?
You did.
I do, Joe. I'm all for this. I think this is great. My only concern is that this is very limited to Hudson Yards and that we are very careful. We're very careful about crafting this, but otherwise, great. Absolutely do it here.
Yeah.
But not necessarily somewhere else. So how can we be careful about that? We're not setting precedent. We are very specific about this area.
So what we're doing is we're not increasing above the 12 FAR state cap. We're just taking, this is an artificial zoning cap that says you can't build 12 FAR residential because it's a commercial zoning district. We're saying just lift that cap in the zoning text to make it a 12 FAR. Dolores?
So just to juxtapose this with my position, what I spoke previously, this is not about upzoning.
Right, no.
So the FAR is already going to be at a certain height. What we are saying is make more of these projects residential. That makes sense. That makes sense for us to be stating here because we're not asking for a zoning that doesn't already exist in terms of the overall height, which is where people will be sensitive. And as JD mentioned previously, that we haven't received broader community input on the thought about height.
And I just want to make a note, there's an error on this slide. A4 is not 31.6, it's 21.6 FAR. That's the error. Oh, we've been joined by Katie Stokes. Hello.
Hey there. Were you done, Dolores? Okay. So I just had a question. So I see that we're saying to expand it to the 12 FAR residential, but we're not saying it's required to be residential, right? Or are we in a way because we're trying to limit the commercial?
Every developer wanted to build more residential here, and the city said, no, build commercial. So they are, by regulation, capped at 6. If we are successful in bringing it up to 12, they will do mixed use developments in a heartbeat. We've heard that back and from a lot of developers in this area.
Okay. And then just one last quick question. So you said that the developments are already happening in A2.
They're constructed.
So, and how tall are they? And are they residential?
they're all, this is called a super commercial district, right? There's a 90-story building across from my house, 90.
Oh.
These are all monster commercial buildings. The Tishman Spire building called the Spiral on 34th and 10th has 2 million square feet and is topping out at 1,000 feet. These are not little buildings. These are monsters.
Okay.
Yes, Betty.
I believe that for the Port Authority mixed use building, did we say 25% affordable units?
Yes, I have to change this slide to 25% also.
Oh,
I made a note already that didn't get captured.
to be consistent, right?
Yes.
Okay. Although I thought maybe we could change it the other way, have the Port Authority mixed use site be 30% affordable.
Well, we can certainly, as we come back to the plan again and do the little I's and dots, we can figure out what we want to do. And I think that'll also be part of a negotiation with the Port Authority, Betty, honestly, end of day, right?
Yeah, even if they don't, have a stroke looking at that. Okay.
Other questions about this Hudson Yards change? So we're going to revise this table. When we looked at it at first, when it included all the sites, it's not yet revised.
Joe, can I just, sorry, before you.
Oh, yes, please. Yep.
Just to say that, like, we were pushing for this increase in residential when we were having the discussions. So that it's now really being like reflected in our plan is excellent. And I think I want to emphasize what was already said of the buildings are going to get built. Let's at least fill them with residential and not just commercial.
So just a note for the committee, it has been in the plan since 2015. We kind of all forgot about it and had amnesia. So now that we're re-emphasizing it, we said, do this, make the change. I think now the time is finally right for the change to happen. Going to the next section.
Joe, Brian Weber in the attendees has his hand up. I don't know if we're taking.
I want to go to attendees at the end.
Okay.
Because we're moving ahead pretty good here. Special Clinton District. We only have a few sites here. And these are locations that are industrial. So this is the, is it ABC, JD, or CBS on 57th Street?
CBS.
That one's CBS.
Yeah, CBS. Yes, those studios. It's rezoned. It is zoned M15. It's on a wide street and a wide avenue, and we look at this to be rezoned to be consistent with the blocks to the east to a 12 FAR, R10 bonusable to 12 as the rest of the wide streets are, which will produce around 211 moderate middle income units. It does not mean it will not be a mixed use building because CBS probably will like to redevelop it itself. This has been in the plan since 2015, along with this small site on the east side of 11th Avenue between 55th and 56th. That is an auto dealer. And again, for affordable units. I will note that all of these have a 2 FAR of industrial uses because a lot of the auto uses along 11th Avenue are not just auto showrooms. They have union auto repair shops with a lot of very important and good jobs. That's why we asked for that to be retained. And the entire 11th Avenue corridor south of DeWitt Clinton Park allows that auto use to continue to preserve those jobs. Questions about this in Clinton Special? Okay. Now we have all of West Clinton from the plan from 2015. And we asked that there would be that this go from a 5 FAR up to a 7.2, but we keep the 135-foot height limit. The idea is to build residential buildings that are denser, but at a lower height. No changes since the 2015 plan. Questions or thoughts on this zoning action? The community had asked for this to be done in 2009 and DCP refused. Okay. So when you put them all together, yes,
Yes,
raise hand.
sorry, Joe, I did have a question. Could you talk a little bit more about DCP's rationale back in? I know. I just curious.
All I can say is when I sit in meetings and the response is we must have a place to store the toilet paper for Midtown.
Yeah.
I know that it really means they're not just ready to deal with this yet, right?
Okay,
And so
yeah, that's,
the community board really engaged with this so seriously, and we could not get them to move to introduce. We got residential on the east side of 11th, but they would not allow it on the west side.
Roberta, it was also, they argued UPS and Verizon and all those places needed, it was the last place in Manhattan they could have their buildings. That was part of the rationale as well.
So a lot of our responses in the fourth bullet require this 2 FAR of industrial use as a podium, and you build above it. So we have FedEx and UPS and, like that kind of stuff. So listen, we'll see if now the time comes where this is finally ripe. You have to keep plugging at this year after year.
fair enough, thank you.
And we'll revise all of these again to get the numbers accurate and correct. So I will tell you that the zoning and text amendments, if we look at them, will probably produce roughly 4,500 affordable units. And then we have the whole sort of totals, right? The totals are not finished yet. We'll continue to work on those as we now refine these. But we're talking about a production continuously of roughly about 15,000 apartments. That's what our plan has pretty much consistently said. And we should note that a lot of things are done. So some of these units have been produced. I want to end our discussion tonight, though, on a site we haven't talked about fully, which is Bayview. I want to stop the share there, and I have more detail on Bayview so we can put this into the mix here. Okay. So very rarely would we have, can everyone see this? Is it large enough? Very rarely do we have plans for a building. The community board has plans for this building because in fact, we went through a whole RFP process. Should I make it larger or?
Yes, please.
How about, is that good?
That's nice.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get the full building on. Let me get a little. I guess is that okay? Because you won't be able to see it. So this is a very odd building. I want to just take it to the floors, then I'll talk about what is proposed that could happen on every floor. The building is built full on the first floor, meaning the full lot. It's built full. Hold on, how do I do this properly? It's built almost full on the second floor. It's built almost full on the third floor. And then it starts to shrink a little bit and you get further up, then you have these courtyards in the middle. So let's talk about a general idea for this, included as part of our ESD plan. This building, in our slide, it showed it as a combination of community facility and supportive housing. And for the first time, psychiatric beds for the very severely and persistently mentally ill, people who need the 24/7 care as opposed to more care than supportive housing can deliver. The odd part about this particular building is it also has two major community facility items that don't exist in other places. This is a full-size gym, and this is a full-size pool. This was an original YMCA, the Siemens YMCA. And then there are all these small sort of rooms you'll see in the green that were YMCA rooms. Upper floors have more and more rooms. And you can see they're really spread all the way around. So the question is, we looked at this building and say, can this building function as a combination supportive housing, psychiatric bed facility with 24/7 care for people who need a hell of a lot more help and supervision and treatment, and a community facility that maintains the pool and the gym for the broader community. I put this out to broad discussion, starting with Maria, because she's been in a few meetings that we've had with our leadership about it. Maria.
Actually, I like the idea a lot. I think there's a need for both. And I like the idea of a community space because, as was pointed out in one of the meetings, the Fulton Houses is nearby, right? And when you think about Chelsea Elliott, they do have the rec center across the street. So I like the proposed idea.
Paul.
Yeah, we've gone over the point. I think everybody agrees we desperately need beds. My only question to you, Joe, is has anybody ever done anything like this before? Although my first reaction when you mentioned it was, God, who wants to live in Bedlam? On the other hand, many people, I'm sure, would see a value in that. I don't know. It's mind-blowingly daring. I hope it works. I wish it would. But has anyone ever done it?
Let me just talk about this in broader terms.
Yeah.
First and foremost, this is a mixed-use facility, so certain parts would have to be separate. People who need 24/7 supervision would not be living in the same portion of the building with people who just need regular supportive housing services, right? A section that is a pool and a gym would not be physically connected or access to people who have severe mental illness, right? That has to be supervised back and forth. The question is, has it been done before? Just like supportive housing was not done before with a mixture of community residents and people who need services? No, but now it's done all the time. Have YMCAs across the country been converted to supportive housing and maintain community facilities? The answer is a resounding yes, all across the country. The new introduction here is the idea of the deep need for serious psychiatric beds on a local level that is not and run by, like a not-for-profit model and a hospital model together. Katie, I cannot wait for you to jump on this one.
So, as we know, I'm on the board of BRC, but we have lots of organizations that do provide psychiatric services and provide beds for those who are severely and persistently mentally ill. So I'm thinking it would be so great to get their input.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And but your organization does not provide beds. I'm talking about truly 24/7 supervised beds. Very different models. It's interesting, I think,
Actually, yeah, I mean, we do and others do too, but yes, I would just encourage us as part of our process of thinking about this to reach out to those organizations in our district who do this and get their input. That's all.
Yeah, I think the idea is that if we put it out there as an idea, then we try to work with the state to develop an RFP with all those stakeholder inputs, as if we can get this some traction on this. Roberta, then Dolores.
I think this is fantastic. I'm wondering, one, if there were, alternate plans considered, if there are things that, like elements of this plan that you believe should be up for discussion or debate. And then secondarily, if this would take advantage of the governor's or the legislature's increased reimbursements for psychiatric beds and could be leverage the state program.
It very well could, and that might make the thing work.
Yeah.
Financially for the psychiatric beds, And again, remember, this is just a floor plan of the existing building. This is not a program. It's just sort of laying it out in colors. Yes, Dolores.
What a great opportunity for reuse of this building, as we tried a couple different concepts here that did not come to fruition. I think this actually does a few things that are very important. One, it maintains this incredible building with some of those original uses intact if this does come to fruition. But more importantly, it's providing that direct need within the community for psychiatric beds. We have not had in our community a dedicated psychiatric hospital. I mean, the majority of the state ones have been in Brooklyn, like Kingsborough Psychiatric Center, and Bellevue's the primary that had always been in use. This is real important to advocate because it hits a lot of boxes. And I think that if we as a community board can work through all the potential pitfalls and concerns, we can help walk the rest of the community through how this actually fits a lot of needs, and it will be a real positive for our specific community and the broader community.
So for discussion purposes, really called out 2 floors for psychiatric beds, because again, none of us know how this is going to work, and we should be careful of being a pilot program to see how it can be managed. This looks like this would be a not-for-profit in conjunction with a hospital running this, and then the facility portion of it would be maybe another not-for-profit for like the community facility stuff. I think it's important to put the specialists together to run this kind of mixed-use community facility. Pete?
You didn't mention anything about the roof.
The roof is open, and I think it'd be used for recreation. The prior applicant wanted to build on the roof. That's a problem. This building is also historic. It's a state, it's on the state historic preservation. It's been deemed landmark eligible, but not landmarked. So pretty much the idea would be this building stays as is and you build around it, and there is an open area on the roof, Pete. That's gorgeous. Any further thoughts about this as I'll go back to the plan? Oh, sorry. More people raise their hand. Who else? Maria, I can't see.
Pete.
Katie.
Pete.
Oh,
Well, now it's Josephine and Katie.
Oh, Josephine and Katie.
I think it's a great idea. When would community discussion begin on this?
Well, first, I think we should put in the plan in sort of like broad terms. I'll go back to that slide in a second, and then we kick this discussion off during this year, because if the state is interested in moving its property, this is an idea of getting, by the way, serious affordability for low income and meeting a serious need in our community for the psychiatrics, for the supervision that people need, as opposed to just dumping on the streets. So I would say probably the earliest we start talking about this would be probably in September, if we can get the state engaged with this.
Thank you.
Who else has their hand right?
Katie and then Betty.
Katie, thank you. Katie?
Hey, just wanted to clarify. So would we get some input from folks like Maria, the people who had the beds closed down at the hospital and they were trying to get beds back? Would we get their input? I mean, we have contacts with these organizations. I would just suggest that we get input before we go to the community.
Yeah. All we need to do is to put a slide in tonight, right, in the plan, and then think about, let's discuss at our July meeting, like what is a plan to plan? You know what I mean? Like we should talk among ourselves, like who are the various stakeholders? What do we do? We want to build a coalition around this as a use. And also, I think it's very important for the Fulton houses that this could be an incredible resource for those thousands of people that live there to actually have a community facility so close. I mean, so getting everyone in the same, it's a big bucket. It's a big boat. We got to get everybody into it to figure it out.
Right. So I think if we just even put a bullet point, and we're going to include reaching out to community experts for input before finalizing our ask, I think that would just be useful.
Well, our ask is going to be, tonight it's broad. We'll get back to the slide in a second, but very broad. That's a great idea to do a whole community discussion on it. Betty?
Yeah, a couple of things, since I'm very familiar with this building.
Aren't we, Betty?
Is the brown building the annex building?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And obviously this needs to go to the Chelsea Land Use Committee.
Absolutely.
At the right time. And it certainly beats making it into a jail. And this is just a picky thing. The green area are the jail cells going to be torn out?
Betty, forget the plan. Forget what's on this thing. This is merely, it's the colors that matter. It's not all the lines inside.
Oh, okay. Maybe it'd be good to take those little jail cells.
No, we can't. This is the base plan we got from ESD. So you really can't.
Okay. And did the state people have anything to talk about on this?
No.
No,
This is local.
Right. Okay. All right. Maybe it would be great just do something like put preliminary or draft or make it.
Do you mean for discussion
discussion
purposes only, like that?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Anyway, that was just a thought.
So why don't you show the slide that you would put in the plan? Because I think that's what's confusing us. This was the discussions.
Yeah, this is not being distributed all to anybody. This is for our discussion alone. So I'm going to go back to the slide. The right one. Here we are, coming back to the beginning of our world here. Here we go. So all this says is the existing building, right, is 101,000 square feet. There's that we propose 56,000 for residential, 8,500 for psychiatric beds, and 36,000 for community center. And it would produce approximately 61 affordable units and 24 psychiatric beds. That's the rough back of the envelope, and we can slice and dice this however we want. And we'll put in the bullet about starting a whole community process to figure out what to do.
Okay, so no green and orange.
None of that. That was merely for us to discuss among ourselves.
Okay, all right.
How do people feel about this? What changes can we make to this slide besides the whole community discussion? Any thoughts?
I think just the suggestion of need to work with subject matter experts and the broader community to better understand how to bring this concept to fruition, because again, it is new.
And that'll really belong we'll put something in here, but we'll talk about it in the intro a bit. Yeah.
I don't know if somewhere along the line, there were major infrastructure issues in this building, and I don't know where that fits, but maybe later.
Eddie, my answer is it's a building. There's always infrastructure issues, and they're surmountable. A lot of that stuff was thrown at us because the developer wanted to do something different. So.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I like all these elements.
So we have reached the end of our second portion of our affordable housing plan tonight. So let's go around the room and take some comments or thoughts, starting with Travis.
I appreciate the discussion tonight. I think that the presentation of Bayview was outstanding. I would love to be able to pioneer for our group to be able to bring something new to the city as a concept. So I appreciate everyone's energy tonight, and thank you.
Betty.
I think we ought to move ahead with this thing. I think the intro has got some important pieces that we discussed earlier. That's it.
Katie. Oh, you missed Katie.
Yeah, I missed the first half of it. So, but what I did hear sounds interesting. I mean, so I just noticed on the last slide, I think that it's 24 psychiatric beds, I guess.
That is a back of the envelope. Who knows? We have to figure out that a little better.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we can, encourage maybe even more, but
let me tell you what I gave the guide to Savannah. I said for every 2 rooms, make them 1, because they were like little cells. And the last thing we want to do is put people in a cell, No,
100%. I'm just wondering, maybe did we take away some other space from somewhere else?
I got to look at it more carefully, but this was just to get our discussion going.
Yeah.
Dolores, on the overall plan?
I think that as the plan has always been, it's real important work. And thank you, Joe, and to Savannah and your staff for doing all of the back end work, which is bringing our whole history to life. I think it's real important, and it really informs not just our community, but I think the city at large on how to really understand what's in your community, what's missing, and what you need. So thank you.
Joe, can I just interrupt? Sure. And ditto what Dolores said. That was perfect.
Pete?
I'm all for it, and I think we should go forward.
Okay. Leslie?
Thank you for all your hard work, and I say go.
Paul?
Yeah, it's sprawling. And if they had sitting in on these conversations for, say, 10 years, they would say, I think people want to put housing everywhere, and they'd be right. That last one is such a challenge and daring. I'm proud to be associated with it. That's all.
Sabrina?
Just such a complicated work. So I really, this is great. Appreciate you and your staff for doing something like this. I have to educate myself more. I think for example, I didn't know it when we had women prison in our district. So I'm hoping that, yeah, I definitely need to educate myself more, but this is great. And I'm all for it.
Great. Thank you. Hector.
I'm just saying.
Joe, I have to applaud you and your staff, and Savannah as well. Basically, this is phenomenal work and very in-depth, and I appreciate all the efforts that they put into it. And as somebody had mentioned before, the last portion is very ambitious and pretty strong, and I hope we can bring this all to fruition. So yes, wholeheartedly, thank you.
So I just want to note, it's not just like me and my staff. This has gone through the community board, majority of this multiple times. And every time we go back and forth with it, it gets a little bit clearer and better. So it's part of our work jointly over a number of years. Josephine?
Looks good overall. Just reiterating the need to lower that 165 band just basically throughout everything. But
yep.
I love the last idea, and I'm just really excited to see where that goes.
Let's go to
Jessica and JD.
I was going to say JD and Jessica.
JD. Yeah. Sorry, JD.
I ditto to Dolores's comments.
And then Jessica, who caught the very tail end of this.
Yeah, apologies. I had a board meeting this evening for work stuff, but I know a ton of work has gone in, and appreciate all of the effort being put here, and look forward to reviewing the materials more closely.
And Jeffrey, you're going to get the last word on this one.
Yeah, I appreciate the discussion from the get-go. I would note that I feel there are some inconsistencies in terms of a willingness of approach of what, if we change a use, it's okay, and this committee suffices for community discussion. But if we're coming to talk about change of FAR or height of a building, inherently there's an expectation that this discussion is not does not set a mark. That's great enough. So just for example, we are putting forth a really bold, progressive, and excellent idea for Bayview, but considering any push of the envelope for an increase of FAR on a site was not considered, and this discussion didn't feel it was given back that this wasn't enough. So I guess I would just raise a flag of seeking consistencies. I am all for what this committee is doing, and it's done, but there does appear to be some inconsistencies, and maybe that's universal in all the hard work that we do. But that's just stood out to me this evening, and I'm super excited to be helping to move this plan forward.
So just want to note, when we've been changing the uses and the heights and the FARs, that has gone through the full board about 5 times so far. So it's the full board that has assented to these. The committee proposed many years ago, but there's been a lot of discussion about it. So please, I don't want to say for the public and for some of the members, it is not as if this committee just said do this without incredible debate at the full board about some major changes. And I think the great part is we got to, oh, sorry, Roberta.
Yeah, we missed Roberta.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have the full screen, I can see you again.
Okay. Assuming you completed that thought on Jeffrey, I did want to see it. I both echo a lot of the sentiments. Really helpful discussion. Really appreciate the level of discourse and all the efforts that went into this. I was wondering if we could kind of recap what would potentially go in an introduction before we leave this call, just to
right. So we actually have an introduction. Mm-hmm. It exists. The plan is online. The introduction has to be modified in certain areas. We've added the ESD in one group, so there's no introduction for that. The Port Authority was not here, so that's another introduction section for it. We're going to change the general AMI things, as we talked about the AMI band split. So that's got to be a general part of it. Otherwise, if I would ask everybody, and I can actually say this for the first time, please read the current introduction. So when you get sent the revised introduction, you'll see where the differences are. It's not going to change that much except for the sections I just detailed. And of course, we'll have a note about Bayview as an opportunity for a brand new model. But I think the things that I got were the AMI discussion, that we make sure, I'm pretty sure it's something about no donut holds in the AMI stuff. We'll note that. That general statement that flexibility in FAR, if it's 100% affordable, as a general statement. We put the 135-foot height limit on the Intrepid site because that's part of the other. By the way, part of the problem we're having is some of these things overlap now. So if we say it over there in West Clinton, like Jeffrey, we didn't say the 130-foot height limit on the DOT site because we'd said it someplace else. We got to sort of make them consistent back and forth. I caught a lot of that in the last couple of days, but not entirely. And the gateway, Betty brought up the issue of the gateway encumbrance on the 29th Street site. And then we're going to do a whole community discussion with experts and community regarding the Bayview. I think that sort of recaps everything. Did I miss anything, anybody?
I think that was good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hector, yes.
Yeah, just a quick question. On the FARs, are we going to set or try to propose limitations on the heights of some of these buildings? Because honestly, we know that some of these heights can get out of hand and block the view of some of these residents.
What we have said, where there are height limits in the districts already, of course, those be respected, right? And then anything by the river, we have a note that appears over and over to have buildings that are slender and not overwhelming, not to block the river in general. Dolores?
I just wanted to note that the FAR discussion, I think, really needs to include both of our land use committees.
Right.
And that allows us to have that broader community discussion. And I think, Jeffrey, that's how we get the consistency, is when we bring land use in to discuss land use specifically and bring this view from the housing committee on how we can achieve more affordability and have that broader discussion. And that's where we can improve the plan to get the consistency, by ensuring that the land use committees are taking this up and bringing that broader discussion to the community.
Sure, completely. But I would note the 165 AMI band as well was a simple go around the room and a change was made. So I think that if we're going to have community
But that's
debate,
in our purview. That's in our purview.
It absolutely is. So if this is the discussion for community debate, then I just want to understand that that's the consistent approach. And so is the plan that the land use committees will take up this package as a whole, or will they take sort of sites separately, or only in the future as they come?
I was just making the suggestion that the conversation about specifically land use issues like FAR needs to be also discussed with a land use committee. And that's what I'm saying is housing's viewpoint is to produce more housing. But again, the expertise and the dedication of those matters, and we have overlap. We have two co-chairs, Chelsea Land Use co-chair, as well as a previous Chelsea Land Use co-chair in the Hell's Kitchen. So we have the overlap that allows that conversation to be consistent. I'm just advocating for it. If you want the consistency, is to allow those conversations to happen, since that's land use.
Let's go to JD and then Betty.
And can I bring Brian over?
Yeah, in a second. Yeah, please.
I just want to say, I thought there is consistency, Jeffrey, and the consistency is both the Bayview and the increase in heights are things to be considered by the broader community. And as Katie said, by the experts. So I find the approach totally consistent.
So I just want to say,
I reject your argument.
We've been maintaining great consensus. Let's keep going here, folks. Betty?
I don't remember what the introduction read as previously. And if you change it, it'd be good if you do highlights or something. And then do we ever say something like, especially since we've now identified sites that are state sites and other sites, that we will be having a dialogue with those agencies and organizations, EDC.
Yes.
And do we put that in the introduction?
But by the way, Betty, we've had the state sites in here except for Site K in the Intrepid Parking Lot since 2015. So, and we've published this plan over and over. We can have a general statement of working with city or state agencies to bring these to fruition. I think it's there already, but I'll check.
Okay.
Brian, now member of the public, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, committee. And thank you for putting this all together. I had a question and a quick comment. My question was back to Hudson Yards and that slide. I just wonder if you can clarify something. My understanding is that you're not talking about increasing the FAR. You're just talking about changing the usage. And
we're talking about reallocating existing FAR from commercial to residential.
Right. So it's still going to be consistent with the proposed FAR, but we're going to allow for residential in lieu of commercial.
Right.
We're not. Okay. Thank you.
Not the proposed FAR, the existing FAR that in the zoning today.
Right. So we're not talking up zoning for what is currently planned.
No.
Okay. Thank you. That clarifies that. And I would just say, regarding the Bayview site, I think I understand the board thinks it's a wonderful proposal. And I would be very interested to see what the broader community and the residents that live in proximity to that and the businesses that are there as well. I think you really need to take it beyond this committee, which I understand you plan to do.
Right.
I don't think you'll have the same response as you have in this committee. That's just a heads up. And offline, Joe, you can tell me why I'm wrong.
No. The bottom line is, if you bring stuff through a full public process with people talking about it, people understand it. If you impose it, they'll say, go to hell. That's pretty much the nature of how the public works. We have Charles Stark.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Charles, you're up. You're on.
Oh, hi, good evening. Thank you very much. And I would echo what's been said. I really appreciate this discussion as a member of the public. It's been very informative. I just have one question going back to the AMI bans, or perhaps a suggestion, either question/suggestion. I find the discussion of percentages of AMI to be very difficult to understand how that relates to me personally, because you see 100% of AMI or 135% of AMI or 165% of AMI, and you don't really know what that means, and it can seem, I think it can seem crazy to be subsidizing people who are making more than 100% of AMI, even though I am a tenant who in a household that makes more than 100% of AMI, and I'm subsidized and I'm getting subsidized rent. So I understand why that happens. But I'm just wondering if it would be possible in the document or perhaps in some explainer to sort of take that a little bit further and give examples of what incomes would be accommodated by those levels if the sites were developed now, which obviously huge asterisk, they're not going to be developed for several years, so it's going to be different when they are developed, and also what some examples of what the actual rents would be, because I think that would help us, like for me as a member of the public to sort of better understand, like, is it reasonable to be advocating 165% AMI, or as Roberta suggested, is that actually already maybe really being accommodated by the market? I mean, then if I could see what the rents were and what the incomes were, then I could go on the web and I could see, okay, what on Craigslist or whatever, and see, okay, this is what units are being advertised for now. So does it make sense for us to be subsidizing units that proposing in an affordable housing plan to have units that would be going for what people can get on the market, or is in fact that not available on the market now, and in fact is really something that should be in the plan? So I was just wondering if that could be maybe explicated further in the plan, and to really give, with a huge asterisk that obviously when and if these sites are developed, it's not going to be what is said here for incomes and rents, but just to sort of make it more tangible for members of the public.
So the plan in its introductory section has a whole discussion about AMIs, how they're calculated, what it means, how it works. But more important, attached to the plan are the actual dollar values per each AMI per household. And it has a whole table, and it has the current rents. Every year we've updated the plan to add 2021, 2022, so people can easily say, oh, this is what this means, because the percentage of AMI means nothing until you look at that table. And the issue about the 165 I think was a very key one to have a discussion about, because we know, based upon what's available in the market today, it's very hard to find a 2-bedroom for less than $5,500 a month. It's unbelievable if that's what the market is. And when you figure out what is 30% of that, what does that income need to be? That's what gets you to say, oh, we need to deal with that income group also. So that's that whole very solid discussion we had. And I think maybe we want to note in a appendix or just a section of the introductions, here's what our current market rent is. Because the truth is, other parts of the city, the market rents are not like that. They're not $5,800 for a 2-bedroom. In Jamaica, they're not. In Mauritania, they're not. And here they are. Let's go to Matt Lee, our next. Thank you, Charles. Matt Lee, our next member of the public.
Yep. Thanks very much. I actually spoke with the district manager for CB4, and he encouraged me to come, speak at this hearing. And it's related to what's been discussed tonight largely, but it's specific to issues that are going on in housing that is deemed affordable by the city. So I live in a rent stabilized building, and the conditions that I'm, dealing with are unacceptable. I live with, there's 16 units in my building. The stairs have been a problem. There have been cracked walls. There have been other issues that are dealing with safety and health that, have been escalated and not addressed. So I think, as we talk about assigning more affordable housing, as we think about development in our district, I think we really need to focus on, as part of the plan, what we're going to do to make sure that the affordable housing units that are provided to residents are actually safe, affordable housing. And that the developers or the people that are running the buildings, my building is owned by Mark Schaffman. He's actually been listed in the New York City Public Advocates list of worst landlords. My assembly individual is involved in escalating him for fraud to the NYDHCR, which he's been getting away with for years. And I just, in thinking about future development, I think it's so important to think about how are we going to change the status quo such that we don't run into scenarios where people have quote, affordable housing, but in fact, there's so many issues, right? With the HPD not doing proper inspections, not following up, not, the NYDHCR not checking the maximum legal rents that are submitted to them by developers. There's so many issues related to affordable housing that go beyond just assigning, more units. And I just think that needs to be part of the plan. And I don't know if it's really a separate menu, a separate item on the agenda, or if it's really something that we can incorporate into the discussion we've had tonight. But I want to emphasize how important, I think that is to our community, to me personally, to the people that live in my building. And I just feel like it's not getting the proper attention from our city. And I wanted to raise that tonight.
Well, very much. Thank you, first of all. This committee frequently takes up those issues in specific buildings, in broad terms, in policy terms, over the course of a year. We do it all the time. Tonight was the specific issue about updating a plan that, because of COVID, has not been updated for 2 years. That's a broader policy issue in order to respond to the new administration. But we, as a community board, frequently engage in very difficult buildings, trying to assist tenants and work with whatever advocates or elected officials that are working with them. So please feel free to come to these meetings, hear what's going on. This is not our normal kind of discussion. This happens once a year or once every 2 years. So your issues are pretty much the top of our issues over and over. Roberta?
I did just want to raise the potential for the committee to at some point take up the issues of high violation buildings. There are some buildings which is very high HPD violations. They're not being closed. And I really appreciate what Matt said. And I think it might warrant some further discussion. If not in this plan, then in a future committee meeting.
Yeah, I really believe the venue is a committee meeting, and let's ask Nellie if we can just determine when to put us on the agenda. And then we can also invite people from those buildings. We'll put a notice out to talk about those buildings. That'd be very helpful. Who is next? Anybody else?
Joe, is this a good time to digress for a second to new and old business?
No, I want to make
sure you're not done.
No, I want to make sure that it seems as if we have consensus that we're proceeding ahead on this section of the plan and get ready for next month when we go through the intro. And Betty, I don't know if we're going to do it in review text. That could be very hard to read, but we'll put it out there and see what how we can make it the most consumable. Any other thoughts about the plan before we move on to Maria? Okay, moving on, Maria.
Well, Roberta just sort of opened the door for it. I was thinking about it, and I was going to be asking if anybody had any interests or things that they wanted to see on the agenda moving forward. No guarantee that they would be, but just curious about thoughts. So Roberta sort of started that with what she just suggested. And I was just curious if anyone else had any other thoughts.
Remember, we have no meeting in August. We're just meeting in July, for July and August.
But thinking forward, like the, fall, winter, next year.
Any committee members?
Yeah, that's a big question, Maria. I think that in terms of themes or concerns or issues that have been happening, I'd like to actually think about that for a bit and to be able to circulate to both you and Joe some of those ideas instead of on the fly just thinking about something, because there are things that are happening that I think that we could take up in Housing, Health, and Human Services in the fall for sure.
JD, followed by Jessica.
Yes, I think one thing we should take up is Bayview in terms of the health, serious people to come in and tell us how that would work. Like Katie said, I think that'd be part of the health, part of the HH and HS. So I propose that.
Jessica?
Yeah, thank you. It's a bit premature to say that this is a priority, but I do want to flag, we had shared, I think Jesse had shared with you, Joe and Maria, that there's a fellow who's been working really under Clue, but it's actually much more district-wide and very related to housing, connected to the commercial vacancies and looking at those as community assets and thinking about them as potential projects to address a housing issue. And so for conversion. And so, similar to Bayview, I would just want to note that they may represent opportunities for us to look at more closely.
Jesse, I was in a meeting about something else today with Jesse and Paul and JD. We looked at that report a bit and we do have some feedback, and we sort of talked to Paul about it because there's things that are not quite accurate. So we want to make sure that it's a useful document for us.
Sure. And frankly, even if it's not this, it's conceptually, I think there's something there. And whether it's these specific sites or because we also raised some questions and agree that I don't think we're in a position to endorse this as a plan, but rather conceptually to look into the issue.
Roberta, other items?
In addition to something related to violations, this both relates to that and then the previous letter from last month. HPD overall has a pretty major staffing crisis that is no, I mean, I don't know if there's a place for the board to just articulate just how meaningful that is to the community and to urge the city to consider making either concessions or flexibility to make it possible to fill the vacancies and just whether it be inspectors or project managers, make sure that people are getting through the door, because I don't really see how any of these issues wind up getting addressed by the agency without that happening.
We have never as a community board had an applicant come to us and say, I can't get anyone assigned to look at my application. I've never heard of that in my entire 42-year history with HPD. Never. That's a whole new problem. Maybe we should take that up.
Well, Joe, we have in our budget, we do ask for very specific things that are related to HPD. Perhaps what we draw out of that is a follow-up.
Right, because these are actually funded. They're funded, they're not filled. So maybe, Jessica, that comes from budget side through exec or something, because the idea that the agency is well funded but is not filled and staffing is just hobbling affordable housing production right now.
Yeah, I mean, I no longer oversee the budget task force, but I definitely think it's something that we should, that's something that if we want to make that, this is exactly the time to have that conversation, right? Because if we want to make that budget request in the winter time for the next year's budget, we need to have had a committee meeting on it. We need to have written a letter, and we need to have something that we can point to. So I think.
But it doesn't feel like it's a budget request so much as a management request, because I think the budget's there right now, right, Roberta?
The budget is there, but I don't know, during the budget process, HPD, it appears wound up requesting less money than it initially wanted because it just didn't have the staff to justify the budget. That's kind of the severity of, I think, where we're at.
Like they couldn't spend it.
Yeah, they could not spend it because they could not staff.
They had to roll it.
Sabrina?
They had to roll it most of their budget, meaning that they didn't spend it, but
they rolled it over.
Yeah, for some of them, some of them for PS and OTPS. But the thing is that it's complicated because the staff issues, like we need to figure it out. What are those problems? Because what's happening with a lot of the city agencies, and it seems like for HPD, is like folks want flexibility of hybrid works, and the city is not allowing that. So I think in order to have that conversation, we need to really get into like what is happening with the staff, why people are not, don't want to work in HPD. So I don't know if there's a way that we can at least educate ourselves and then get into I don't know. What's the reason? I don't know if Roberta, if you know more, but I'm curious to know, like, if we want to have like a sort of recommendation, because the budget is there. It's not a budget issue.
I think we're in a really weird moment with this, because usually we're fighting for more funding for HPD. Not the case. I don't know we're going to get anywhere in July on this. So I have a feeling this might end up being something in the fall, as this continues to be an ongoing issue where the housing production like train is just held at the station over and over. So Katie?
I think on this topic, though, it sounds like we could write a letter to HPD, copying our electeds and things, saying, we understand that a lot is being held up because of all of these empty positions. And we encourage HPD to seek advice or whatever about what needs to change there to make the jobs,
Or maybe just make it broad, like to seek different strategies, whatever.
Something, but to just say like, something needs to be done. We all recognize this as a problem. And I would actually encourage us not to wait to the fall to send that letter, but I would send it.
If it's that general, could I ask that you and maybe Jessica work on that as just a general, like, please help us guys, that we have where maybe in the context of that the community board's worked very hard on its updated affordable housing plan, but is really concerned that you have to have staff to execute anything, let alone our plan.
Yep.
Is that a motion, Katie?
Sure, but just to clarify, would we then review this letter at our July meeting, or would you want it before?
I think we'll bring it to July meeting because we have time till the 21st to the 27th.
Yep.
It's not going to be a long letter. It's just it's sort of like,
yep.
please help us.
Katie, if there's any way I can help you with that letter, there's been some really great resources from NYC on the staffing crisis. They've written about it. I'd be happy to help.
Please add in anything we can do to put our voices in here.
Connect via email. I'd love to help you.
Great.
Okay, so that'll come back to our July meeting. So our July meeting so far is 2 agenda items. This small letter we just talked about, and then the whole intro to the affordable housing plan. And we'll get the stuff out again so you can look at it. I want to thank everybody for tonight. This has been a really serious, substantive discussion. Thank you, Jeffrey, for attending and listening to our serious discourse in this committee. Thank you, public, for being here. And we did it in a little over 2 hours. Not that bad. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor, raise your hands. So I can see you.